I just found Chip, but he was curled up in a pile of blankets on the kiddo's bed, and he looked too comfortable to pick up and drag in. So, hi from Chip. What have I been doing since last week? Really, it's been a week of odds and ends, and a lot of time poking through YouTube, listening to music. So times I could have been sewing, I was not. Non-sewing thing I did is last Sunday, it was really, really mild outside and sunny. So I put Asuka in a new outfit and took her outside for photos, which I did post on Instagram. So that's just a little, I've already, I haven't made anything for her specifically, but I do have a case full of doll clothes, a suitcase full of doll clothes in this size, so she has options. So I just thought I would show her, because I'm still really happy with how she turned out. You can get a little idea of how her blushing looks on her knees, and I know from here I can see her shimmers. I don't know if I mentioned, I probably did, that there is a layer of shimmery paint on her. And it does show up in the sun, but I'm not sure if it'll show up in the sun here. So, put her somewhere where she's less likely to scrape anything. And then the doll, one of the dolls that Kate's Creations sent, the Reliable Made in Canada doll, I made clothes for her. So I had her wearing an SD size dress before. It just had an empire waist, so that even though this doll's shorter proportions, it worked with the dress with the shorter waist. So she can wear SD size patterns. I just have to make everything really short, and that's what I did with this. This is that same sweater that I used to make the sweaters I showed in the week before last video, or was it last week? One on Bellflower, my Miro Del Mica, and one on the doll with the Blythe body with another Kate's Creations Barbie style head combination. I think I've already put that in a box. So I'm getting a lot of use out of this. Like I said, mentioned before, I thrifted this sweater for me, and when I got home I found it had moth holes all over it, so instead of getting angry that I didn't have a sweater wear, I was happy because now I had some wool that I could use to make doll clothes. And this is some of the cloth that Kate Pandorfel sent along with the doll parts that turned into Elsica. So I think this is the first thing I made from some of that Kate cloth. I have made others, which I will show you. And this hat was made for me by a doll person 12, 13 years ago. Originally intended for pull-up, but I have kept it for that long because it's obviously fits a lot of other dolls. And then the glasses I think are probably American Girl size, but I found them in the random toy bin, and I don't have much orange. I wanted to match the orange in the skirt, and this was kind of close. And I went ahead and took the ankle straps that didn't reach all the way around her ankles off of these just to make proper shoes. And she can stand. I mean, her feet aren't even flat. She's not even well balanced. Doesn't look like she'd be well balanced, but she's obviously standing. I also spent a lot of time since last week making fit on the Kemper Doll Supply website, which is where these shoes are from. Like filling a shopping cart and saying, no, I don't know these, and going back the next day and filling a shopping cart and saying, no, I don't need these. But they are clearing out a bunch of their, I think it's the Fairy Fantasy Color, the curly wigs that tend to come in smaller doll sizes. Like they make them in Barbie size, and I'm really tempted to get some of them, but I don't need them. I'm trying to use what I have, which, it's not hard to use what I have, but it's a lot easier to buy stuff. So I got this outfit for her, and she's small enough that she fits on my photo stage in here, so I got pictures of her inside, but I probably will take her outside eventually and take pictures. I feel like she needs a coat and some leggings and some heavier boots if it actually snows enough to stick. It snowed here this morning, and it was starting to stick, and then the sun came out and all the snow went whoosh. So. And then I was going to do stuff with those two dolls I threw into the green dye bath and then airbrush their body to match, but the larger doll that I got from the Doll Person D-Stash, when I just curled her hair up real fast, I was trying to make it curl like under, be wavy instead of just being straight, because it got totally straightened when I threw her in the dye pot. But when I poured the hot water on her, it softened a bunch of her paint, and so she has a bunch of weird scrapes. So also, she has an odd size of foot. That's why I was on the Kemper site. I was trying to see if buy shoes for her, and they had some really inexpensive shoes that would fit her. So I'm going back and forth, like, do I want to buy shoes for this doll I'm not even sure I'll like, because I'm kind of mad at her right now because all her paint scraped off? Or do I want to learn to make doll shoes finally? Even, you know, I got a book about how to make doll shoes in like 2000. And I've never made doll shoes. I know the theory behind it. I know the reason a lot of people's doll shoes don't look right when you just make them directly on the doll foot is because a real shoe has space for your toes. So you're supposed to make this shape called a last, which is foot shaped, plus the toe box, it's called, is formed onto it. So when you form the shoe shape around it, it's making shape for the toes. And when you form it directly on the doll foot, it doesn't have the toe box, and it doesn't look right to me. And that's also why I haven't actually made doll shoes, because to make the last you have to actually sculpt the toe box, and I don't trust my ability to sculpt things symmetrically. Yeah, I can make excuses for my laziness. So I didn't do anything with that one doll. I don't know if you can see this bandana right here, that's her all wrapped up. I guess I'll show you her paint scrapes. Big scrape on her leg, big scrape on her other leg. I don't know if you can see it also, the top up here, I guess with some water hit it, it actually changed color too. So I will probably revisit her once I've had enough time to forget how annoying it is to have her paint fall off. But I still do like the colors, the parts of her that took the dye turned. You know, her hair is originally blonde, her eyes were originally blue, but now they're very shades of green, as well as her skin being green. So I'll probably get back to her. I'll probably end up ordering shoes for her, but right now I'm being stubborn. That doesn't happen. So the other doll that I had thrown in the green dye pot, I figured out her torso, even though she's a little kid doll, her torso is about Barbie size, so I thought I could just go through the stuff I have and find some, like a Barbie shirt to put on her to make a dress. And this is actually made for dolls a little bit larger than Barbie. I'm not happy with it, and again, I didn't actually have any shoes that fit her, so I'm not sure. I'm not too thrilled with this doll right now, but I am thinking about her. This is the doll, one of the dolls at Kate's Creation set that I said I threw her in the dye pot. And her legs were soft plastic and took the dye. And her arms are soft plastic and took the dye, and obviously her head, her body is hard plastic, and it has paint scrapes on it, even though I airbrushed it, but I guess I didn't seal it aggressively enough. So the nice thing about airbrushing this body is that the head and arms and legs come off really easily. The other doll, if they come off, it's not easy. That's why it was a little bit challenging also to airbrush, and why she was overbalanced and fell down before I even finished airbrushing her. So I guess another option, since the body did kind of start to take the dye, is I could also make up like a really concentrated pot of dye. Take off all the arms and legs and just strip all the paint off the torso and just put it in the pot for a long time and see if it takes the dye any better. In the past, when I was dyeing stuff black more often, I just put the dye pot on the back porch where it got a lot of early morning sun, and the dye pot itself was black, so it got pretty warm, and I just throw stuff in randomly and it would dye pretty well. So I don't think I will set up a green dye pot in the summer to just throw dolls in and like leave them all summer and see how green they turn, but I might. And then last night when I was cooking, I thought, hey, I have the stove element hot. I'll go ahead and grab this and give her some hands, because you know these old gymnast Barbie bodies have what I don't know if it's affectionately what we call the karate chop hand, because there's not much grace to it. It's a very flat hand. But if you heat it over an electric burner, take careful not to get it so close that it bubbles and melts, and yes, I have done that with them, then they get soft enough that you can bend them. And they're still not great hands, but they're just a lot more graceful I don't even know, graceful, more interesting than they were originally. And feet are too thick to melt, soften over the stove like that. But what I did, I don't know if this will show up on camera, is I grabbed this made to move and put her foot next to this foot and traced around it. So you can see how much smaller a made to move foot is. I also did it with the bottom. And so I will go down and attempt to grind this foot down with the Dremel, although I have some guidance this time. In the past, when I've used the Dremel to grind down these big, clunky, flat gymnast Barbie feet, I've just done it without using any references. So, of course, they won't have ankle articulation, obviously, but still it might fit into some different shoes if it's smaller. There are shoes that fit this size foot, just not many. And as far as random sewing goes, I made these. Obviously they're for 60cm dolls. The cloth, I believe Queen of Squids sent, and the elastic, fancy elastic for the waistband was from Cosmo Moore. Thanks again, everybody. And this will probably end up on Asuka, but I wanted to show her legs off for now. Or it'll end up on Bellefleur, or maybe I'll get Mitraillette back out of storage, or I'm actually working on getting a doll that I'd had before and sold to somebody else, and they did some modifications, started modifications on the doll and didn't like how they're going, and just kind of finally admitted that they were not interested in continuing to work with the doll. And I said, well, I'll buy it back, but actually we're going to work on trade back. So anyway, some early next year, hopefully I will have another 60cm doll, that particular doll, but I will have to also figure out how to sculpt and skin tone match airbrush to get this doll back to where she was when I sold her. But that's a few. It's a project I'm excited about, even though I don't know what I'm doing, but you learn by doing, right? So that's another doll who could wear these. Yes, I'm rambling. And then I finally got back to work on that pattern that I've wanted to share for, what, 2-3 months now? The original, it was inspired by this shirt. Just solid front. Let's see. I'm looking at the version I've been working on has really enormous poofy sleeves. I might go back and make the floofy sleeves smaller like this. But I'm still working on it. So the original, it just has a single front. And then I came up with a variation inspired by this one to have seams on the side, which you don't have to insert stuff into. You could just make it out of a contrast, which I have a doll wearing the contrast somewhere. She's just, for some reason, I didn't think about getting her out before making this video. But then I had a third idea to put a panel at the bottom. And this was the first version of that I made. This is cloth from Pandora also. And I didn't like the proportion of this. I thought it should be taller. So I made the alterations to my pattern and made another one out of Pandora and Susan cloth. And that was this one, and after I made this I thought, no, you know what, I like this proportion better. So I restored the pattern piece back to this size, and I decided to try the final piece that I wanted, which was a self-fabric ruffle put in that seam. And that's this one, which not only do I think the ruffle is too narrow, that's the other thing. I knew I wanted to put the ruffle in, but I know from past experience, if your ruffle is wider than this, it's really hard to avoid sewing the side of your ruffle into your arm seam. So I needed to move this toward the center, which is one of the changes I made on this one. So I did this one. Don't like the way it turned out. Not only did this ruffle piece need to be wider, just because it's too tiny, but also it needed to be shorter because it's too ruffled, and I had to pick out a lot of my stitching because it was so ruffled, like the top of the ruffle was bending over and getting caught in the stitching. If you've done much with really narrow ruffles, then you know what I'm talking about. If not, then ignore me. So not only did I know I needed to change that, but I'd also noticed on all of these, the pattern piece has a little notch at the center of this and the center of this, so you can absolutely line up the centers. But I noticed on all of them that even though the centers were lining up, things were getting distorted because this is a curve and this is all bias curves. So bias, if you don't know anything about cloth, is really easy to stretch on a woven cloth. So that was getting stretched out of proportion and weird. So I made more changes to the pattern, making the ruffle pieces wider and putting more notches to help line things up. And just before I made the video, I did a sample front of that. And I think the ruffle is wide enough at the top now, but I need to make it wider at the bottom. Maybe. But adding all the notches, I don't know if they'll show up here. You see, there's a center notch, there's a notch inside, notch inside, and there's actually also a notch here that lines up with the seam. And that does not look as badly distorted there. I mean, if I'm going to be persnickety, it's not perfect, but that might be because I did not get everything lined up on the grain vein width, or it might be because I'm seeing things. So I think I only have 2 more samples of this to make. One where I make the piece wider at the bottom, and another one where I make it out of lace. So I will probably go ahead and finish up this shirt before making the other ones. And I finally ran out of brown thread that I had in the bottom of my machine. So I might, after I make the last of these, then I am freed up. I can move on to the me-size project that I wanted to make for about a week now. But I might talk myself out of doing that too, because it's a little more complicated than I made, and there's one huge change I want to make to the pattern that I'm not really sure if I know what to do. But like I said, that doesn't usually stop me. So next week we'll find out if I've made any progress. Thanks for watching.